All right, everybody, welcome to the first Tinderbox meetup of May, May 4th. May the 4th be with you. Let's just jump right in. Typically, the way we run these formats is we go around the room and we have new people introduce themselves. We then have people suggest topics that they want to discuss. If we have a theme, we jump into the theme. So we don't have anybody new that I see today. We don't have a theme today. So let's just jump right into our projects. Although I do want to say hi to Tom. I haven't seen Tom in a long time. So hope you're doing well, Tom. Maybe you can give us an update on your comings and goings and your Tinderbox adventures, if you have any. You're on mute. We can't hear you. Or something's something's with your audio. And oh, by the way, everyone, I'm in the car finishing up a 2,600-mile road trip with my son, having picked him up from college and now driving back home. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay.
All right. There you go, Tom. So what's going on? Haven't seen you in a long time.
Yes. I've been sort of focusing on figuring out what I want to do in terms of research.
When you grow up and become a big boy.
Well, I already did that. This is, postgraduate big boy.
Yeah.
When you figure it out, let the rest of us know.
Okay. Well, given the sense of the world right now, I will charge you quite a bit for that.
Oh yeah.
No, I've been working on research on industrial development in New England area, and have finally focused down on looking into the histories of two tycoons in the 18th and 19th century, the Appletons and the Lawrences, which don't get quite as much play as the Cabots and the Lowells here. But I've been digging out a bunch of information of how to do that, and I hadn't really focused down on anything in quite a while. So now I'm beginning to, okay, let's do the research. Lots of interesting stuff about them and their role in developing and financing the industrialization in New England.
That's fun. Nice, and I'm sure Tinderbox will be helpful for you in that, or
Yes,
its ecosystem of apps.
Yes, I'm already beginning to use it, and I need so much of the information now sits outside Tinderbox. I need to get it into Tinderbox, via the simple import markdown files and stuff like that of highlights and things.
Very nice. All right. Is there anything particular that you want to talk about in regards to that? I mean, we don't have a theme today, so let's just pick something up.
Not particularly. I've sort of have a framework of how I'm going to do this. I've developed over the while. I haven't really developed enough of it, used it enough to see if it really works.
Okay.
If it's a way to do that. Not.
All right. By the way, if we don't have a theme, I do have one that I'd like to suggest, but I don't want to hijack the conversation as I always will. So, but I don't want to hijack the conversation. As smiles, when I say that.
Michael, where are you?
Mr. Roos, you came off your mute. I am somewhere on I-5, about 48 miles out of Sacramento, finishing up this. And it's not a 1,600-mile road trip. It's turned out to be a 2,600-mile road trip, Bruce. So my son and I took a 1,000-mile loop and went around Olympia National Park and hung out and had a big old time on our way back coming home from college.
Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Congrats.
Yeah.
Which college?
Yeah, University of Puget Sound.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then he's figuring out how to organize a yeah, and then he's figuring out how to do an environmental science trip to Costa Rica next spring. So we'll figure it out. Okay. So anybody else have any other topics? Mr. Art, what's been on your mind lately? And Peter?
Me, not a whole lot. I'm back in India for another month or two. So it's 9:30 p.m. here and a long day photo session. And yes, using Tinderbox, as I was saying last week, just at the very, very basic and at a very beautiful level. Like I just only approach it right brain for the last month or so. I only make my little containers and little boxes and just getting back to roots. And it's great.
Very nice. Very nice. All right. So does anybody else have another theme that they want to discuss or a project they've been working on? Dave, you've always got something new with Captain's Log. What's up?
Nothing's new. I've been working on selling this house. So yeah, I haven't done much in Tinderbox last 2 weeks.
Got it. Speaking of houses, we found out we had termites 10 days ago. So we've got the carnival at our house right now, doing the whole fumigation thing.
Isn't that standard if you live in California? Like I had 3 homes in California, all had termites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And dry
It's
rot,
just,
dry rot. Yeah, the
yeah,
termite guy comes and blasts you and charges you another 8K for dry rot because that's going to
Yeah.
like destroy your house too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, so the theme I'd like to throw out there for us to discuss is, this idea of so I'm writing an article this week and I'll be publishing it tomorrow on the discovery mechanisms in Tinderbox. And I like to think about, so if you had a corpus of notes and information in Tinderbox, what approaches would we go about? What types of methods would we use to, discover information in Tinderbox? And a couple thoughts that I have on that is you have intentional discovery, meaning that you want to go out and with intention find specific strings or types of data, because you generally think or know it's there. So, and there are various mechanics that you can use to enable that discovery. As simple as the command F function for find, running some collect or find action code, etc. And then you have the unexpected discovery, meaning that you want to somehow be navigating your Tinderbox file and have your Tinderbox file help you draw connections and uncover insights amongst your data set that you didn't necessarily know, much like what Bruce is doing with his book, as he's navigating his file as he's writing his book about his brother and his relationship with him. So what are people's thoughts on that? Obviously I've been kind of trying to index the different utilities and tools that we have in Tinderbox to be able to navigate that discovery, but I think it'd be fun if we can explore that idea a little bit. Thoughts, ideas? Like types of discovery we might do, how we might approach that discovery. Mr. Art, go for it.
So I can only sort of kick things off with like an anti-response because again, for a lot of my creative writing work, much of this sort of depends on combing through each and every note or like digging into the little depths and little alleyways of notes and sub notes and thoughts that I've put together and over the years, and then finding a little gem and then dusting it off and see how it contextualizes with something else, and clashing, literally doing like a fusion reactor process, clashing 2 or 3 ideas and thoughts, sometimes contrasting, sometimes complementary, and then something flows from there, and that becomes something different because it's no longer a seed idea. Now it's actually a draft of sorts or part of an assembly for a team or something like that.
So what'd you call it? What, anti what?
I don't know what I called it. See, this is my problem.
Yeah.
There's
What
never
I
any
like the term,
specific
whatever you
term.
used. Anybody remember what he
It's
used?
probably
What term?
I don't know, maybe anti-response. We could look at the video playback, but basically it is that. It's just like it's for me, it's a process of breaking down. So in this sort of beautiful way, Tinderbox is one of those only applications that can sort of handle the way I do that because I actually don't organize. It's more a sort of question of finding little pockets and then being able to think back to that. Oh, there's that little pocket, and it might not necessarily be structured the way that logic would dictate, in the sense that you go like, it's not a taxonomy necessarily. It could be one idea that then spawns another thought or concept and then shoots off into some other direction. It might
Right,
be
so-
something to do with science fiction, but then relating to emotional instability. Like, so these things are all just various atoms that just collide basically at different points. I may look at a
Yeah.
note that may make no sense to me today, and then tomorrow it turns out to be the most valuable note in my Zettel.
Right. And so with that in mind, so there is a discovery method you're suggesting, if I were to label it, is like a manual culling, where you open up the file and just kind of manually go through it and, try to stumble across things and let your mind make those connections.
Yeah, basically. And then from those connections, and I pull together something that could be the draft or a pre-draft or something like that.
And how do you go about pulling those things together? Do you copy and paste information out of do you leave that original note intact and then copy and paste it something else, or do you allow it to morph and become something different?
So it goes one of three ways. One is I definitely would be inclined to leave the original note intact, but then usually when I look at a note, and if I've written it a week or month, a year ago, I'm going to have something more to say about it. So I'll put a little timestamp in there and go like, okay, I've appended this note on so-and-so date, and I've added or I've changed my perspective or I've sort of fleshed it out to that extent. And then I might create another note, and then I might create backlinks to my 2 or 3 source ideas for the day. And then that sort of starts, it's a mise en place in a sense. It's like, when you're preparing a meal and you sort of put all the bits together that you're going to need, and you put the chopped onions in one place, and then you whisk the eggs and you put them next to it, and then you dice the tomatoes. So it's a bit of that, where you're sort of prepping this, but also remembering that source idea is a seed and could be used anywhere in a different manner for a different project.
And
But
what
like a
is
stem cell.
and what is I use the stem cell analogy all the time. And what is the mechanic you use to make those backlinks? Are you actually doing like the text links within the notes? Are you linking note to note? Are you using attributes, or are you digitally making those connections, or are you just trying to remember them?
I might just do the square bracket backlink
So the
method.
zip link method. Yeah.
The zip link method. Yeah, I don't never know whether to call it zip link or not, or whether that's not like a kosher name, but okay. But yeah, zip link.
Well, no, zip link is a method for creating a text link. So a lot of people
Sure.
call it a text link or a zip link, and it's not a zip link.
Yeah.
A zip link method for creating a text link. It's the way to talk about it.
Okay, so zip link method for creating the text link. Fair, good. Yeah, or I might use attributes to sort of draw a thread through multiple needles at once in order to sort of pull together something at a more broad basis. Like if I have a bunch of notes about AI or robotics or something like that, I might be able to, scan through a bunch of notes that are in one part of my Zettel and go like, oh yeah, okay, I need this. I need to look for something. I've even tried with NL tags, creating and generating NL tags, and that sometimes works pretty well too.
Right.
Particularly if I'm
Okay.
looking for like a historical reference of some kind.
Right. Okay. So there is a methodology of using the natural language tagging to facilitate your discovery. Now, when you say you're kind of going through it, do you ever use the find feature or an agent or something to help you discover those notes, or is it more of just a visual
Oh yeah.
click and pick and hunt scan?
No, combinations of both. Like I even have a container just called agents, and I put all my agents in there, which is itself useful sometimes. I may have done a search, a year ago, 6 months ago for something. And if I go through my list of agents, I go, oh yeah, this agent would work. And I just repurpose it for the search of the moment. But again, as I don't know if it's coming through in this, but it's almost like trying to find as gloved hand a method as it can be to scan and comb and search through my data. So as in one moment you're doing the writing, in another moment you're doing the reading, and then you start writing something else based on what reading what you've gleaned from your reading of your own notes and what your mind frame was back then. I can't emphasize enough, like just the idea of my mindset. Some days an idea is just like something I look at a note is just rubbish. The next day it's a very, very critical idea.
Sure. Oh, that makes sense. I mean,
I
context
have
is
a
everything in that
little,
regard.
yeah, I have one attribute which I call priority, which is terrible attribute because, the moment you set a priority to something, but it does help. Like if I know an idea is just a really, really good idea and I'm working on this or it's part of something larger, I'll give it a high priority. So then all I have to do is comb through my notes for like, oh, what are my, 5 and above priority
Yeah,
notes.
but your point being that priority is so subjective. Today it's high, but tomorrow it could be useless.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Mr.
nice though. It's
Rogers.
nice to to trick yourself.
Yeah, no, but partly what I'm trying to get at though, is at the very beginning of our conversation, though, Dave, you can pop in, is you said, I just kind of cull my notes. And so my immediate thinking on that was, well, you just open up a file and manually navigate through, open stuff up and see what's there. But then we have started to find that there are some Tinderbox operations or Tinderbox methods that you leverage to help you with that process, such as agents, such as using the
Oh,
find feature.
absolutely.
And that's what I'm trying to get at is like, what are the
Yeah.
mechanics that we use to help people do this culling in this evaluation for discovery?
So, I mean, off late, I've just been doing the most, like I said, the most basic stuff. Like actually, literally, I'm working with adornments and containers all over again. In this really interesting sort of elastic manner. And actually, it's doing great. I mean, that's the whole thing for me with Tinderbox is like there are just so many ways to go over to reconnoiter your
Yeah.
data. It's
By
crazy.
the way, as soon as you just said that, it made me think about, so those people that may not know what adornments are in that regard, is adornments has a unique feature where you have smart adornments where you can pull up an agent that brings in a ton of alias notes, or a map view, it doesn't matter. And you can then add essentially a search, query parameters to an adornment, and then any note that means like query to that adornment.
you're fading out a little
Some-
bit. Your network's fading a bit.
Nothing I can do about that. So in some respects, though, that smart adornment feature feels a lot like the Gaudi view, right? Where you can attract similar notes using a smart adornment, or that attraction concept that you can leverage in adornments. But since my network sucks, let's have somebody else talk. Dave?
Well, this reminded me of something Beck Tench proposed. I guess I got to look at the date on the I put the link in the forum link in the chat about speed dating notes, and then there was somebody put together a YouTube video of a method in Tinderbox to accomplish what she described. And I haven't looked at that in a long time. I'm just raising it here because it seems relevant. And in my case, when you have a Tinderbox that you've been working on for many years, you can create an agent that I have one that says on this date, and then it'll go back on May 4th. Whatever I've written over the years on May 4th will appear in that and give you something to think about or reflect on or whatever. But that requires a lot of content.
Yeah, no, I like that. So that idea of finding random notes, and it was Pat Maddox, I think, is the one that did that, if I recall. Did that one? That was a good one. Okay, yeah. So using the random random note discovery, I think is a powerful operator that's available in Tinderbox for that. Nice. Anybody else have any other thoughts or comments on this? Peter, you're always a good one for comments. How do you do discovery in Tinderbox?
Usually I'll set up an agent looking for key terms that are related to what I'm focused on at the moment. That seems to work very well. The other thing I also use in conjunction with that is DEVONthink with the concordance view. And the concordance is incredibly helpful in dealing with a ton of documents. And I might do the discovery in DEVONthink and then reflect that back in my Tinderbox document, if that makes any sense.
Well, what makes sense to me for that is you're using DEVONthink to help you find discovery within your what do we call it? Your raw source notes.
Right.
And then you'll pull information out of those raw source notes into your Tinderbox file to help you with your thinking along the lines of the way Art does it.
Yeah, that's the workflow.
Yeah. Nice. Anybody else? How about you, Win? As you're doing your teaching and leveraging Tinderbox for developing your courses. I haven't seen you in a while too. Hopefully your things are doing all right.
Hi, thanks, Michael. So I've been very busy with the actuality of the semester and not, which is now sort of winding down. So I don't have great answers on like having sort of figured out Tinderbox, in particular for this, because I was using it to try to aim at a very structured way. I want to get to the discovery part, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What else? How else? Yeah, like Chuck, you know, when
All
you're
right.
using Tinderbox, do you ever use features like find and or iContains to you know, because I think there's also something to be said in the Tinderbox process of if you think about the context where I said there's kind of two methods. There's the intentional retrieval discovery, and then there is the exploratory discovery. And you know, art tends to follow the exploratory discovery. A lot of the times when I'm, for example, building my templates in my publishing system, it's very, and or I would suspect with like your block diagram system, it's very intentional. Go find me these notes that meet these criteria so that I can reconstruct them in this way.
Yeah.
And so can you explore that a little bit with us?
Well, I mean, I have to confess that much of what I've been doing with Tinderbox has been highly intentional. I mean, as I have specific objectives, I'm trying to pull information together that I know can be correlated in some fashion, and I'm looking for, in some cases, just automating the discovery of how things relate to each other. And some of it can be very simplistic, like a concordance. Some of it can be relationships between pieces of information. And, you know, a lot of what I'm dealing with is technical in nature. So, for example, I might have rules that are used in a network filtering system. And, you know, I want to correlate those rules across multiple pieces of network equipment that are in different places in the network dealing with different issues. And finding commonalities or finding ways to optimize some of that stuff. And Tinderbox has been useful because it allows me to pull things like that together, but then to create my own notes explaining why that's being done that way and what to do about it. So, you know, if I could draw an analogy, when we develop programs, most of us learned we got to write a lot of comments because, you know, a day later we can't remember why we did it that way. And the problem with a lot of the things that I deal with is that there haven't been particularly good tools for commenting the stuff that makes, for example, a network work. So Tinderbox for me is a way of pulling in the details and then adding the comments that I wish were there. And then that allows me to do some further investigation or analysis to find, is there a better way to accomplish this particular objective? Or is there a better way of explaining to people who might need this why you do it this way and what it's for?
Well, and also going back, by the way, on your commenting point, I think that there's an important element of discovery there too. And I think the method of commenting is helpful for discovery, to your point, in that when you're writing code, sometimes you've written a code because of structural assumptions you've made that are up or downstream that may not be present at the point of that particular line of code.
Absolutely. And that is a problem that is endemic in a lot of the technology we use. And again, my reason for getting started with Tinderbox was I perceived it as a tool that could bridge the gap between explanatory information. Why are you doing it this way? What are your objectives? Where are there problems with it? Things like that as well. And then here's the actual detail. Here is the machinery that does something. And these are the configuration statements that make the machinery do what it's supposed to do. And of course, machinery has this annoying habit of sometimes not doing what you think it should be doing. So, you know, those are the kinds of things that I look at. Now, I will say there's another aspect of of discovery, which is quite different from what you've been talking about. But this is where I'm looking at data. And I'm realizing there are tools that come from other data analysis areas that I dearly wish I had at my fingertips while I'm in Tinderbox. And I'll give a simplistic example. I might have, I've been looking at energy management systems. And so I might be looking at, data spanning many months of how much electricity a particular appliance uses under different conditions. And I might want to correlate it with temperature or things like that. But sometimes what I really want to know is something simple like, when was the maximum energy consumption by that device, at what date and at what time? That's a simple piece of information. And when you deal with large data sets, that can be hard to extract. So yes, it's a solvable problem. It's just that I'm beginning to think that in some respects, it'd be nice if we had some integration with other tools or some ability to do that kind of query operation to then feed the analysis you're trying to conduct and the documentation you're trying to provide around something. But that's probably not something most people are dealing with. So it's an issue I'm dealing with, but I wouldn't expect that's a common Tinderbox user problem. So I throw it out in case anybody else is interested, but those are some of the issues that I'm dealing with on a day-to-day basis, one way or another.
Well, that makes me reflect on the idea of the discussions we're having a few months ago on integrating with R, where if you had data sets that you could be pulling into R and then using Tinderbox to then run, our correlation requests or min-max analysis requests and have that data come back to Tinderbox easily. So doable, but we've not gotten there yet in terms of that level of interaction.
I just, I see the pieces that are out there, the machines, the tools that would do it, trying to pull them together in an environment that supports a workflow and an analysis process is the challenge. MathWorks would probably be ideal, but I can't afford MathWorks. I'm sorry.
I'm not familiar with that app. What is?
Oh, MathWorks is the big heavy-duty machinery that people who are doing simulations and modeling, deep numerical analysis. It's the kind of thing that people who are doing financial market analysis might use, but more typically it's chemists and physicists and machine designers who are trying to model the effect of temperature on the particular behavior of a particular machining tool, and how do you develop a better algorithm for keeping the temperature below a particular point so that the machine tool works the way it's supposed to. That kind of deep analysis. I mean, vast amounts of data that you need to interpret and model and get some kind of engineering response or guidance from.
Have you looked at Mathematica?
Mathematica is worth looking at as well. I have this problem. There aren't enough hours in the day for everything I want to do.
Yeah, I got that one too.
I heard retirement's for that, but hopefully I'm going to make it to that line.
I'm supposed to be retired.
I heard the great thing about retirement is you can get super busy and do a bunch of stuff and that you enjoy. Mr. Art, your hand's better for a while.
No, just a couple of points. I mean, one of the things, just riffing off of what Chuck was mentioning, and it is so true and so cool about Tinderbox, because I actually have an attribute just called comments, which allows me to have a separate way to look at my notes, just to say, why is this note here? It has nothing to do with what the text and the content of the note is, because the content might be something completely random or even nonsensical, but the comment field allows me, and again, like I was saying, using a needle to, using a thread to thread multiple needles at once. It's like one way to connect my thoughts and my notes together is also by looking at the comments. Another thing I was thinking about is I just saw an ad the other day for the new Remarkable. And this has nothing to do with the Remarkable itself, because they're promoting it like crazy. But the ad sort of goes along the lines like, oh, well, I was putting all my notes down on various scraps of paper and in my phone and in all these places, and I just couldn't get a handle on all the notes I was writing, and I couldn't sort of assemble them, make sense of them, etc. And so therefore I got the Remarkable. And then ever since I've done that, like my life has been organized, which I think is basically clever marketing speak. And I'm sort of like inclined to feel that even when I'm looking at my own notes, or if I'm combing through to try to make sense of them, it's more a matter of me going, oh, this is the note that I wrote in to address this thought that I had with the intention of doing X with it. And I'm now just reminding myself of where it lies so that I can now make a decision as to whether I'm going to take an action on it or not. And in theory, I know I'm putting out a wild assumption here, but in theory, I like to feel that perhaps, all the notes that we write down and all the places we write down, that is just one aspect of it. And the other aspect of being able to collect it is more like, if we can't contain all these things in our head in the first place, we probably have no business having all these thoughts and jotting them down, if that makes sense.
Yes, say that again. I missed that.
So it's more like an indication, like I can have 100 thoughts a day, but if I'm only going to act on one or two of them, so now I need actually some kind of function. I need some kind of formula to address my interests and to bring focus on them. And it is independent of a system. Doesn't matter if I'm using scraps of paper or Remarkable or Tinderbox, really. But if my brain is able to sort of think about this thought, and very often I'll go through my Zettel and I'll find out, oh, I've got 4 notes relating to exactly the same thought, but they're all slightly different. It's like looking at the same idea through a prism. On a particular day or a particular time in my life, I might feel something about thought. Now, all 4 are addressing the same sort of inspiration of the same idea.
Well, a great example of that is some work I did with one of our community members about a year ago, where he was translating Sanskrit, and he would have 4 or 5, 6 different translations for a particular piece of text. Each one of them slightly different. And to your point, one day it's crap. 6 months later, he's like, "Oh, that translation's better than this translation for whatever context or reason." And so, but yet all of the various translations have some value or meaning in some context.
Yeah, it's very true. It becomes hard to throw away stuff.
It does. It does. Peter.
Okay, I have an automation question, and I'm wondering whether anyone has ever automated pulling a reference into Tinderbox from bookends, then going to the attachment corresponding to the reference, and then using the Finder information to import the URL that actual attachment file had come from.
Doesn't the bookends reference have the URL?
Well, the bookends has the dragged in PDF file, and it's not grabbing the URL that it had originally come from.
Well, I think you would need to capture that URL at the point whenever you put it into bookends in the first place. And if you did that, then you wouldn't matter. That's part of the reason why I like Zotero, is that URL is captured immediately when you use Zotero.
Yeah, because the URL got captured by the Finder as metadata and Finder info. So I can show the attachment in the Finder, and then if I get info on it, there's the URL in the little where from listing. So I was wondering if I can automate getting that pulled in.
Can you share your screen just so we can see what the data looks like? It's hard for me to visualize.
Hang on, let's see. Now that's weird. Now it's not showing it. Good grief, I must have picked the wrong one. Hang on, let's see. Share screen. On the wrong screen. Hang on. Get this figured out. No.
So while Peter's doing that, Chuck, going back to what you said earlier, isn't the comment about the math question you raised part of the intentional retrieval? Meaning that you're intentionally wanting to retrieve some dashboard number such as max data.
Right. And the challenge is just, when you have long streams of data, it's not the kind of thing you really want to drag all that into Tinderbox.
Correct.
It's just, you're looking, it's another case of looking for the needle in a haystack. We have lots of tools for doing that. I was just lamenting that, it would be nice if I had, a way of integrating an effective tool for that kind of data search with Tinderbox.
By the way, I did do that at one point for my doctorate. I had the ability to run a run command from Tinderbox to tell it to grab a text file off my hard drive, throw it into Stata, run the process, and then bring the results of that statistical result back into Tinderbox.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing I was implying that I should figure out how to do. I'm just saying that at least in the intentional discovery process, you're often dealing with data sets, not just notes, and that's where
there you go. That's a good point. And again, there's a certain level of, before Peter jumps in, there's a certain level of, just because you can automate it doesn't mean you should. So at some level too, manually doing some stuff sometimes is actually more efficient.
Right.
Just popping over to the other tool, loading up that file, finding the number you need, and bringing it back to Tinderbox and doing it manually.
Yeah, and in many cases, part of the problem is the getting at the data in the first place, and the fact that data comes in so many inconsistent forms.
Yeah, and when I was finishing my doctoral process, because of that whole manual comment I just made, the one thing I did find useful was to document the recipe for doing that in Tinderbox. So I would document a note that would say, okay, when I need to go retrieve this number, here are the files I need to pull. Here's Stata. Here are the flags that I need to, or commands I need to run in Stata, so I can get at that number. And so I'd put the recipe in Tinderbox so I could reproduce the process. Peter, are you on mute? Are you speaking? Or?
Am I muted?
All right.
Okay, can you hear me?
There we go. Yeah. Well, okay, what are we looking at? Yeah.
Okay. This is my bookends file with my citations. And what I did was I pulled them in to Tinderbox. So I'll do the command option drag to bring in a reference. Oh, why is it hiding Tinderbox on me? There. Okay. Now, let's see. Let me make sure I can see that. All right, now. I can drag in the reference.
He's adopted your separator function, right? And strategy for hints, Chuck.
Yeah, I even have a little stamp here for hide. So if I want to get something out of the map view, I'll just hide it, turning it into a separator.
Yeah, nice.
Yes, that's really easy and elegant to just pop up the inspector real fast. And let's see, where are my stamps? Stamps.
The number 4.
Ah, okay, yeah. Quick stamp and...
Or no, your stamps are on the next one, the documents one, sorry. The white box on the left. There you go.
Ah, yeah, there we are. Hide, and I just set is separator to true.
Yeah.
So that's really elegant. Okay, so now when we've dragged a reference in, our references, let's see. Are off in an attachment folder now. And in the attachment folder, when they got pulled in, a lot of these come from the Internet Archive. And when they're downloaded from the Internet Archive, they get this little where from metadata attached to them. But that isn't showing up inside of bookends. So I was wondering if we could automate pulling it from the URL of the attachment.
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean,
Because it's out there. I don't
so
want to
is
lose
that
it.
so?
Put that
I
into
think
Tinderbox.
yeah, and I think that probably there's some Apple script functionality that could be leveraged. The first thing that comes to mind, possibly shortcuts.
Because basically the overall workflow was I was in Safari poking around the Internet Archive. I found the source in the Internet Archive, downloaded the PDF, then dragged the PDF into bookends and filled in the rest of the reference information.
Listen, okay.
And then if we look at our corresponding bookends, that's the city's evolution. So here's our corresponding bookends record and has the attachment, but it's not capturing where the attachment originally came from.
Got it.
Peter, just a comment, it's Bruce. Am I understanding right? Is this just a missing field problem?
Basically, it's trying to automate the data that should be going into the missing field.
I got it. I just remember
So
what it is.
if I just to butt it for a second, if you were to grab that PDF and drop it into Tinderbox, Tinderbox will render it pretty well as give you the source URL. Or if you are on the internet itself and you drag a clip of text into a note, it will have the source in the URL field.
Okay, let's see what
So
happens.
I think I have the answer, Peter. I totally forgot about this. Yeah, the challenge with that, though, depending on that's unreliable, and if the PDF2 file is too big, you're going to crash your Tinderbox file when you drag stuff in like that. And sometimes when you drag it in, you can be pulling in some unexpected Unicode. That could be
All
Yeah, I
this is
have-
true.
have a
I have
corruption
tons and
effect.
tons of those PDFs where
Right.
it really totally overwhelm
Okay.
Tinderbox to
So-
have them inside directly.
So do me a favor, can you let me see let's see naturally. Okay. Do you have
Oh, and I
Homebrew or
slightly-
something installed on your computer?
Oh, and I slightly modified my RIS export using Mark Anderson's suggestion to be able to capture the link to the attachment. So he had this great little forum post. Let me copy that and I'll paste it into our chat, I think. Let's see, where's the chat now? Well, anyhow, you can grab that off your screen, right? So anyhow, I implemented that, so that helped a little bit.
Okay, so I think the answer, Peter, and I haven't played with this for a while, but I did this with images, and I think the same thing will work. Can you pull up your terminal and see if you have it installed? And if not, let's download it from Homebrew and try it. There is a Mac OS utility called Exiftool. EXIF tool, TOOL.
Hang on, let me just close that out. That's not working. Hang on, let me just start a new terminal. Shell, new window. Okay. Now what we're looking for?
We can't see your window if it's open. EXIFTOOL. Exiftool. And we can't see it, by the way, if you've opened up.
Okay.
Yes, we see it. It's over on the far left.
Yeah, we see it now. Okay. So Exiftool is
No, I don't have it installed.
Okay, so do you have Homebrew or something like that?
Yes,
that we
of
can
course.
install it real quick? So pop over to Homebrew and install Exiftool. And it is a command line tool that will extract metadata from files.
Okay.
So if you were to so you install that tool, and then you put that PDF file in the same directory. So find do the which Exiftool so you can get its path once it's installed.
Okay.
Then I pop over to your run command and pass the we can experiment with it in terminal if we want first, but if you want to stay in terminal, and why don't you say run that Exiftool and then give the path of your PDF file, or go
Okay, that sounds good.
or navigate to the directory where that PDF file is. And then you can run your Exiftool, and then that should pull the metadata from your file. Then you could parse that into a run command, and then just use run command to parse the results. Find the path. There you go.
Let me just bring up the Finder window. Oh, sorry, my desktop's such a mess today. There we go. Oh no, I need a space there. The tool. Ah.
Right. And so
Oh, it is?
now if you trigger that in a run command, then you could then parse that out and you've got it.
Okay, perfect. That'll solve my problem. Thank you very much. Michael, you're amazing.
You got it.
Okay, I'm stopping sharing now.
I haven't looked at that solution in a long time. That's cool. Okay. So that's another form of discovery. How do we extract information from existing files that we have? So that's a good item to drop into our notes for today. All right. Anybody else? Taking some notes here. Mr. Art, go for it.
I had a thought for Chuck. You were talking about like being able to track or at least be aware of streams of data. Is that something you would throw posters at? And then it would just be on your map or in your Tinderbox file as a something to remember.
It's possible that posters would be something you could exploit. My sense is that a more direct approach, like what Michael mentioned in terms of just a run command to run a particular utility that you set up to do that operation, probably be a more direct way of doing it.
Sure, gotcha.
Posters get into the problem. You're actually running something was designed by somebody else to do a display of something.
And you're not actually going to be seeing the display you will be working on. You're going to see something designed by somebody else.
Right. I want to go into a large data set and pull out some particular uniquely identifiable pieces of that data, such as a max over a particular period of time, or a strong correlation between two pieces of data, like temperature and runtime or something like that. I'm just throwing out examples, but and partly I'm using the energy stuff because it's something I've been playing with, but also because if I started getting into the corresponding problems of when I'm working in a network context, it just gets too esoteric, and it wouldn't make any sense.
And Art, one thing I think taking your idea though is once you take the raw data, throw it into an external tool like Chuck's saying, bring the results of that back into Tinderbox, then you use a poster to display the results.
Could be.
That's what I was implying. Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Could be.
Yeah, because
also I use something like Google Sheets. I've also been for a while using Tinderbox not just as the storehouse, but also as and as much as you do so much of the time, Michael, is just using links to external files, and they always then remain in my project in terms of thoughts and thinking but they're an external file which runs on its own. Google
like
does a
just
whole
what-
lot of automatic lookups and things like that. So that's Google Sheets is so
Right.
practical for that.
Or like what Peter just showed us, right? You've got files sitting in DEVONthink, you can pull those over, or in bookends, pull those over, and then you can be extracting information from it.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a really cool form of discovery. Hey, Peter, when you get it, when you actually have figured out the parsing script for that, maybe you can drop it into a forum post. When you're done, if you're talking, you're on mute, but that would, that would close out this piece of this discussion. All right. Anybody else? How else what other things are you trying to discover using Tinderbox? So for example, if any of you used, linking methodologies that would suggest, like, help me find the notes that are linked to this way and that way. Yeah, how many notes are, meet this particular link type? Do you ever do stuff like that, Art?
Yeah, so I'm not one for visual links. I think I got so tired of them in all the other programs I've used on my way to Tinderbox, like the mind maps and things like that. So visual link lines bother me no end. And so literally I try to have as few of them on. I probably have like 3 or 4 across all my projects.
Okay, I'm sorry, you broke up on me. So you kind of stopped using, but you don't necessarily need the visualness of the links to be able to leverage, the interrogation of link types.
Yeah, intentionally so, because I want to have the creative ideas just not connected really, not even linked. That's my brain's
Got it.
job.
How about you, Bruce?
I just dropped the URLs for that forum discussion of exporting the attachment paths from Mark Anderson and the Exiftool and the homebrew formula for downloading and installing it.
Awesome. All right, and then Peter, when you get a chance, once you've actually done the run command integration and written the stream parser to pull that URL, maybe you can create a forum post for us.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, and how about you, Bruce? What's your discovery for your book? You've been going through this process with your book now for 6 months or so, or 20 or 30 years, however you want to look at it.
30 years this year. No, to be honest, it's been making sure I've been spending more time teaching myself Tinderbox again. I have a meeting in 10 days with a novelist who has agreed to mentor me through the rest of the process. And I got some nice feedback on some chapters I sent him where, he basically was very complimentary about my writing. So right now I'm kind of in a refractory moment where I'm, his whole thing, it's so funny. He wants everything in Word. I may have shared this in the past. And I don't know about the rest of you, but Word hates me. Word, every time lately I go to use it, it wants me to reactivate the program. And it has put me into some kind of a loop. And I am ready. The only reason for Microsoft products for me is maybe the once in a blue moon that I need Excel instead of Google Sheets. But otherwise, I've had it. So I will be using Pages, Google Docs, anything in the world to write this, but I'll get it to him in the format he needs.
It's a mutual loathing for sure.
Oh my God. So the Tinderbox part is that it's kind of funny. I actually use Gemini Deep Research, and Michael, you are all over the place on this. I had it create a series of lessons for me that just look at agents, queries, stamps, and adornments. To really kind of just help me. And it's so interesting because it took a lot of what you have presented, and I need to look at the recordings of the current course, and I'm just trying to practice. I'm just trying to put in the time. So that's where I am.
Yeah.
So long-winded way of saying not much progress, but a lot of preparation for progress. I have
Yeah, but having said that, but
windows.
let's forget about the Tinderbox part. If we were to separate ourselves out of the tool necessarily, what is your process for discovery as you're trying to find insights in your writings?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I have quite a bit written. So some of it is tweaking and organizing. And this is one of the problems with, I'm trying to describe someone's life, and I'm describing it from various perspectives depending on what year am I describing it from. I'm not trying to describe it as a child, but I'm recalling what it was like as a child. So that's a slightly different point of view, if you will. And I have continued gathering. I now have these people who I've never asked who keep sending me information about my brother, and it's phenomenal. So I'm continuing to amass new information that I'm able to incorporate that I didn't have previously. So in terms of the writing, it's a little bit less about the writing process, and I'd say it's a lot more about the organizational methods I'm trying to use to, as I write, to tell the story and to tell the story meaningfully.
And how are you when you're discovering those new insights from other people? How are you flagging them for future citation or reference purposes, or are you? Are you finding
I'm
some way?
flagging them, and
And how are you
know
doing
what's so
that?
sad? Do you know where they usually go? They usually go into drafts. And I have
Okay.
multiple tags in drafts that helps me find what I need. But that's where most of it is going these days, because for a long time, drafts has continued to be my placeholder.
Sure. Yeah, it's a chum bucket, if you will, before
Yes,
you
it
pull.
is.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, that's how I use Obsidian. 90% of my input goes into Obsidian first before it goes into Tinderbox.
I have tried. I took a peek at Obsidian and downloaded, and and at the same time, I'm not you. You look at something and code appears in your mind, and then it all just kind of happens. And I don't mind doing certain things manually. It's so funny. This is completely unrelated, but I manage a listserv for the local psych association, and there have been all kinds of complaints about kind of the uppityness and the harshness of some of the comments when people get their listserv posts rejected. Well, they've been using templates that were established for them by previous tech committee chairs. I just write mine. I write to the person, and I write and say what's wrong with it and make some suggestions. And I frankly get nothing but compliments back, and people are appreciative. And I'm pretty sure that that has to do with the fact that I'm not trying to save time. It doesn't take me that long to write a simple email to someone. And so my point about that is that sometimes the automation, while it may save you time, it costs you something else. And I happen to like writing, and I like that personal touch. So did you completely drop off, Michael?
No, I got it. And I think
Okay.
that's partly what we were saying in regards to with Chuck, was that sometimes automation's not worth it.
Yeah, so I mean, Tinderbox is irreplaceable when it comes to having a storehouse for all the information, because kind of along the lines of what Art said, or maybe some others, if I look, I can find it. Now, how I look, I
Right.
would never share my screen and show you how I actually look, because it's embarrassing, but I can find it.
Well, and that raises another issue, another tool that I use sometimes that Tom Diaz brought me onto is a tool called Foxtrot. So when I want to search across Tinderbox files, Foxtrot is a great tool for
Interesting.
searching XML documents on drive. And so and it's basically open Foxtrot and have it search within your off your hard drive and say, find me all the XML documents that contain this string of characters, and it will discover the Tinderbox files that have those notes. And so that's how
That's a really
that's how
helpful
I
tip.
perform a search across. That's how I search across Tinderbox files. Peter.
Yeah, I was wondering, Michael, could you show us your chum bucket workflow with Obsidian to get initial things captured before they go into Tinderbox?
It's really not pretty. I can, but to talk to Bruce's point of embarrassment, it's not great. But I'll give you an example of what I'm doing right now. So, for instance, here's today's note on today's meetup. Right. So I just have this sitting next to our call, and I'm throwing in notes as it goes along. Here are the people who are involved. Here's the topic we've been talking about. Different things that come up. I will tend to have a resources section that I'll throw in the end. And so as we're talking, I'm going out there and grabbing links and resources and our references and creating that references or resources element that ends up in every one of our posts at the end of one of our meetups. And this is just kind of helping me think through, or like Melvin dropped in from the chat, the 4 methods of discovery from the annals of, and maybe Melvin, you could talk to us about this, why you dropped that into the chat and how we can leverage this, the annals of discovery. And so that's one of the methods I'll use. And then to the point of automation, I will, I'll more often than not manually bring this over in Tinderbox by a copy and paste. Given that Obsidian is all markdown, I can be copying and pasting tables into this. I can also paste Word documents into Obsidian. And what's really interesting, I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but let's see if we go like this. I do this all the time. If I've got a Word document in where's the heading ones? Style heading 1. Right, so let's say I make this one a heading and add some text, and then we'll call it heading 2. Add some text. 1. Then we can add some text, and then I'll just copy and paste that like this. So another way I'll leverage Obsidian is, so if I've got a Word document, let's say this is the title. I'll use Obsidian as my interim step. So if I paste this in, Obsidian will convert Word document headings into, and I'll show you the source, into Markdown. And so now you can take that Markdown and go over to Tinderbox, create file new, paste that in, and now you've got a Markdown file, which you can now explode. So if I go like that, so now I have the ability to start deconstructing that Markdown file, that Word document against its headings. So I find that a really effective way to leverage Obsidian as a kind of as an interim pathway from a complex Word document into Tinderbox. So that's another way I use that. Another way, if I'm in meetings, I'll use my prefix strategy. Like if there's a task, I'll say like @Gale, blah blah blah, task @Becker. And then we can pull up the previous art. If you remember a while back, we did a stream parsing demo with Obsidian where you could use the stream parsing that would pull these tasks out, and that would pull this @Becker or @Gale out and automatically create task notes in Tinderbox. Or
Yeah, we actually
create
were.
reference notes in
That's why my
Tinderbox.
hand was up. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons my hand was up. And not only that, and also using Tinderbox Vault folder as your watch folder in Tinderbox. So you can just pull any documents, and then you can run stream parsing to break down the properties and assign them to attributes.
Right. Or another alternative, and this is what I learned from Tom, you have DEVONThink do the watch folder on your Obsidian Vault. Then you can do that much like what Peter was talking about. You then do a search in DEVONThink to find that particular note, and then you can bring it over. And I find
So I don't know. I haven't used DEVONthink for 7, 8 years, 10 years, maybe even. I don't have a whole ton of PDF documents I need to refer to, which was
No,
the
no,
original strength of
but
DEVONthink
my
to
point,
me.
but my point is DEVONthink can do a watch folder on your Obsidian vault. And then all of your Obsidian vault notes now become searchable using the DEVONthink AI.
But I'm
Which
doing
is
that in Tinderbox anyway.
Yeah, but no, but again, you can, and especially DEVONthink 4 with its new AI engine, you could say, hey, DEVONthink, go interrogate all of my meeting notes and find consistencies between these meeting notes and have the AI actually run summaries for you, which you can't do in Tinderbox right now.
I see. Okay, I'll definitely give it a look again then. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, the new DEVONthink, it's in beta, but it's wickedly cool. All right, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah. On the integration note, I have DEVONthink importing my bookends references. Then I have Tinderbox watching the DEVONthink group that sucked in the Tinderbox references. Also, I have DEVONthink index the attachments folder and pull that in indirectly into Tinderbox using its watching the DEVONthink groups functionality. And then, of course, since at the moment Tinderbox doesn't have a watch bookends, so I sort of end run around that by using DEVONthink monitoring bookends and then Tinderbox monitoring DEVONthink.
Right. Yeah, I do something similar. Yeah, because Zotero, Tinderbox doesn't have a Zotero monitoring either, so I do exactly that for Zotero. Using having Zotero, DEVONthink watch Zotero, and then Tinderbox watches DEVONthink. So Frederick, what are your thoughts and ideas? Did he leave us? Oh, Frederick just dropped off. Okay, bummer. Anybody else have any thoughts on discovery? What about working with media or videos, or how do you take notes in that kind of process? Or do we not do that?
Personally, I just link to external files.
Okay. Yeah, I do too. That's my strategy as well. Let me think about anybody, how about using the various operations like find, ancestors, different methodology? Because we might want to have a discussion around scope as well. Yeah, Peter, go ahead. Peter, your hand's raised. Do you have a comment? You're on mute, by the way.
Ah, that's why you couldn't hear what I was saying. Okay. Lots of times I will use Tinderbox to organize source code. And in that case, what I'll do is use Hookmark to attach any web research related to that particular block of code to the code that's being written. So Hookmark is absolutely invaluable there. So that also then if I'm inside a VS Code looking at a file, I'll have Hookmark link that file to the references that I used to get that code.
Nice.
So, Hookmark's just absolutely invaluable.
Nice.
So really, in the best of all possible worlds, I'd have Hookmark linking the DEVONthink representation and the bookend citation to the downloaded PDF.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Frederick, right, I was popping into the screen and then asking for your thoughts, and you disappeared, and now you just came back. So what are your thoughts around discovery in general, or within Tinderbox specifically?
So I switched computers.
Yeah, it's like I caught you right when your mouth was full, right when you dropped off right when I said, "Hey, Frederick," and you were gone. So go ahead.
No, I switched computers. So the discovery I've been doing has been pretty hilarious. I mentioned to you before I have a security document that has all kinds of tables and detail, and I've been trying to pull that into Tinderbox to see if I can do some discovery and something interesting with the information in a different way. And so I've been I didn't want to do stuff manually, so I said, ChatGPT, can you do it for me? And it said, sure, sure. And then it said, it'll take me half an hour. And then it goes away and nothing happens. And I'd say, okay, can you do it show me what you're going to do a little bit. And it'd say, sure, sure. And then it'll go away and nothing would happen. And finally I said, what's going on? And it said, oh, I have limits on processing power. I have limits on CPU. I have limits on this, and I'm hitting the limits. And I finally got it to stream it, but it was lying all over the place about what it could do, and lying, saying it would have something right away for me and then never come back. And it was pretty funny. So I'm still working on that, but I've been trying to use chat, and I discovered that I don't know if Tinderbox used to have an import facility. It said it had one, and of course it doesn't exist. But I was able to I wanted it to create hierarchical notes with titles and content, and it sort of did it, except it couldn't put the titles in because the import format for Tinderbox, I guess, is a series of spaces and stuff. It's really kind of weird. And there's no way to set the title at the same time as importing a hierarchical note, apparently. So what I'm going to try to do is make a stamp that makes the title from a node, and I'm still verifying whether ChatGPT lied completely and did everything wrong. So I gotta actually check. It's going to take me more time to check what it did than to actually have done it myself, probably.
Yeah, honestly, I think ChatGPT is lying, because as I was, maybe you missed it, but I was demonstrating how you can import hierarchical structure from a Word document using Obsidian as the intermediary to convert Word document headings into Markdown, and then you paste that Markdown into Tinderbox, and then you can parse it.
No, it's not hierarchical in Word. That's the problem. It's in table. We did the brilliant thing of embedding everything in tables, and I'm trying to get it out of tables and into a more structured format. So it's totally a mess. And there's like 18 tables.
But I'm wondering if you could use Tinderbox, basically take the table out of your PDF document, get it into, say, a Markdown table, and then you can use parsing, Tinderbox parsing, to break that table apart.
I mean, I did it once before with Python, and I was trying to avoid doing any work. So everybody said AI is great. So I said AI, do it, and it lied.
Yeah. No, I'm finding the bravado of AI is astounding.
So I was trying to avoid work, and I realized I can't. But and I'm with Chuck on this, by the way. I have less time than I've ever had in my life, so it's just incredible.
That's actually a really interesting point, though. Somebody just put in the chat, could you convert it to a CSV and then drag it over as a CSV? Because you can do that, and Tinderbox does that incredibly reliably.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid all work, and that didn't work.
Yeah, unfortunately, that the Staples easy button is such a urban myth.
I said AI will do it for me.
Yeah.
It lies. It really does. And then when you say, it says, "Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't do it, and I said I would," and it gives you these cheery responses like, "No problem, I'll have that for you in 20 minutes." And then nothing happened. You say, "What happened?" It said, "Oh, I couldn't do it, but I'll have it down for you in 20 minutes."
Yeah.
Finally you say, "What's going on?"
And then I didn't bother to tell you that I couldn't do it.
Right, I can't do it because I have limits.
Yeah, and so going back
I haven't tried to hack the limits either, but
it's just showing that AI is getting more like us all the time.
Exactly, it's like a really
How many of us have said, "Sure, no problem, I'll have it for you tomorrow."
Right, no problem. Now we'll see if you remember.
Just about to say that sounds like my students.
Anyway, that's been my adventure up till now, and I'm still trying to figure it out.
All right. What about how familiar is everyone around, or do we want to? We got about 17 minutes left or so in today's session, around this whole idea of the idea of scope within Tinderbox, and the kind of the ideas like parent and grandparent and ancestor. So understanding the context of a note, would that be of any interest for people to kind of review that? Because if you're running action code or any form of action code, understanding that scope is really important. And so maybe we could, it's called, in other words, that idea of designators. And so we could spend the last few minutes helping us kind of reviewing the concept of designators and what that means within the context of a note. And that could be helpful for people as we try to explore that.
Sure.
All right, let's do that. We'll do it in two ways. We'll start with opening up a Tinderbox file and then hopping over to ATB REST. So if you're writing action code and working in Tinderbox in any way, so we've got an open file here, and let's create a document. All right, we can use this one. No, let's use this one. All right, so let's say you've got note 1, note 2, 4. Okay, so one thing I think it's helpful for people to understand is when you're, so Tinderbox really drives much of its functionality from the outline. So when you're looking at a note, and so the top level document is called our root. That's the top of the file. Then, so this note 1 is sitting at the root of the document. And so often what I'll do is I'll drop and I think it's really helpful for people to understand too, that and as Art's referenced several times in our discussion today, that, Tinderbox is his Zettelkasten. It's his resources for his atomic notes. It's where he creates his ideas. And what I've discovered speaking of discovery, as I've been navigating and learning Tinderbox, that Tinderbox can be both my Zettelkasten, what I call my resources folder, or otherwise known as my atomic notes or Zettel or something like that. And in that resources folder, maybe you have the idea of terms folder. And maybe in that terms folder, I've got an item called term privacy, right? So, or term, identity. So you can structure your Tinderbox files however you'd like. But I personally have found this kind of, the unstructured environment of my notes, of my structured idea of yet imminently discoverable insights or ideas that I've been, nurturing along the way. And concept designators. To all of the other notes within the file.
Breaking up.
Is
Michael, I don't know if it's just me, about the last 15 seconds of whatever you said was pretty garbled.
okay, I can say it again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's really important with Tinderbox is to understand Tinderbox basic structure. So when we first, which is kind of interesting because when we're first introduced into Tinderbox, we are often introduced, or we're all introduced to Tinderbox as a map view. So when we first come into Tinderbox, we find let's find note. Where's my note 1 in map view? Okay, so when we're first introduced in Tinderbox, we come in and we see this map view. And our natural inclination would be like Tinderbox is a mind mapper, but it's actually from a structural and a designation perspective, Tinderbox it's more important to really orientate yourself to the outline first. And so when Tinderbox is running any operation, this is starting at note, and there's a couple other, I'll point that in a minute. So it's starting from the top of your root and working its way down. And to help you understand that a little bit, if we use columns and we can add notes, you've got outline depth is one important attribute, and sibling order is another important attribute. So when we're talking about designations and orientation in Tinderbox, if you look at this note right now, so the outline depth, and then another important one would be outline order. All right. So if you're thinking about if you're considering your notes and you're thinking about this idea of discovery and wanting to figure out where your notes are, come on. You'll start here. So my outline order says, so when Tinderbox is acting against notes, such as running an edict or running a rule, it will always start with note number 1 in the outline order. and then methodically work its way down to 9. And then once it's gotten to 9, it will restart at 1 and start going through that process again. Or when it's running an agent, it's going to start with note number 1 and methodically query those notes from 1 to 9, looking for notes that meet the criteria that we're looking to discover. So understanding that in terms of Tinderbox's hierarchy is really important. Then the next level over from outline order is to be thinking, let's do this one, outline depth. The next one to think over is outline depth. So, so my order is 1, 2, 3, but what's my depth? So, and think about depth in the form and the nature of like heading depths, like in Word, heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. So much like HTML heading depths. So if my project 1 here is at a heading depth of 1, I'm sitting at the root. My project note here, number 2, note 1, is outline depth number 2, because I'm one depth in from the root. And so this will be very helpful for you, especially for developing any kind of templates or output that you want within your document. And then if you look here, sibling order looks at the order, and then we can say, like, let's call this backlog. So you'll see here, this is note number 10 from an outline order. This is note number 10. This is note number 1. This is note number 6. From an outline depth, they're all at the same depth, outline depth number 1. And from a sibling order in that outline, their siblings are 1, 2, and 3. And then if I go down here, you'll see, maybe I add another note to this one, note A. Okay, you'll see here, this one's outline order is 2, this outline order is 6, its sibling orders are 1 and 2, and their outline depth is both 2. So just kind of understanding the relationship of the order to which notes exist within the Tinderbox file is really important. What you then can start doing is leveraging this concept called designators or designation. So there's a whole number of different ways to identify the nature or designation of a note, such as ID, string, and path. So for example, if I wanted to look at this note, I can see this note has the ID of this. Value it's important to be able to designate a note is its path and ID string. So if you are looking to specifically identify and then obviously the note's name. So if you're looking to designate or identify a note within Tinderbox, you're going to identify or call that note by any number of different levels of uniqueness. So you can call a note by its name, note name, but the problem with calling this note name in this context is I have 2 notes here in this context that have the name note 2. I can call a note by an ID string, which is equivalent to ID, and that it will be unique to that note. Or I can call a note by its note path. In this case, my path is my project's note 1, note 2. Now, the challenge with using path and that idea, which is also came up in a previous Tinderbox file. Let me type word path here so we can see it. Is you'll see here, this note 2 now is in my project's note 1, note path, and note 2. Well, this note's path is exactly the same. So in some certain instances, if you have a note in the same outline or a sibling or in the same container as any other note, and if it has the same name, then its paths are identical, and then therefore you won't be able to consider that note as being unique. So this idea of helping you understand how do we differentiate and identify a note is really important. And then finally, one of the next critical things to keep in mind when you're understanding a note in relation to its other context is this idea of parent. So you have the concept of parent, grandparent, sibling, child, etc. So if I'm looking at note 1, its immediate child is note 3. if I type note 5 here. So if I say, what are the children of note 2? Well, the children of note 2 are note 3 and note 5. What's the parent of note 3? It's note 2. What's the grandparent of note 3? It's note 1. And so if once you start understanding the context of a note in relation to this idea of designation, you then can start running you can then leverage your action code to be able to say, go get me this particular note so I can then run an operation against it. So this is a real really so the more and more you get into running action code, leveraging these different types of designators is critically important. So for example, the current note, the cover note, this is the note that I'm actually being acted on versus that is the note that will be acted on by Tinderbox. I'll give you another good example of where was I just recently doing that? I was doing that in I'm trying to think of a Tinderbox file that I was just doing this in. I think, okay, let me stop sharing screen and I can find it, and I'll just wrap up and show you a great example of where this designator stuff can come into play. Teaching Tinderbox. All right. Lectures, here we go. This. Oh, and actually this will be, if I can get my Tinderbox to work, this will be a great example of basic discovery. Give me 2 seconds to get this working, and then I will pull it up.
This actually has to be a first for you, Michael. Running a session, a Tinderbox meetup at 100 miles, whatever,
from
80
the
miles
car
an hour from the car.
Took me a while to realize Michael wasn't
exactly.
driving. You're not driving,
Yeah,
right?
no, well, I wouldn't have been surprised, but yeah.
I thought he
I
was
am not
driving.
driving. Okay, great. I found it. All right, so let me show you this. So I was just pulling up my teaching with Tinderbox file, and given that, and this is another real basic concept of discovery that I think we've covered before, but it's not bad to review it. So if you use the command F function, you can pull up and by the way, command F performs 2 different areas. If you're in your text note, go like this. My text expander must not be running. Let's just do privacy. Identity. So if you're in the text note and you hit Command F, this pulls up the find function, and I can do a search and find the word privacy, for example, in the note. So you can search within your text. And so that can be really helpful when you're looking to search within a particular note. But if you're looking to search within a particular file, if you're in the outline view and you hit Command F, that can pull up the find function. So if I can type the word privacy, and I can find all of the words that contain the word privacy. Just so people are aware, the search dialog box here actually supports regex. So if I type like capital P Y and do like that, Tinderbox is going to find up all of this text strings that start with the word P and end with the word Y, and any number of different characters in between. So I'm not sure if people are aware that this can be a really, really powerful way of performing discovery in Tinderbox when you're looking for text strings that meet a particular pattern. And any regex pattern that you want to perform can be run within that way. The other thing I wanted to show you here is if I go up here, I can actually select exactly what kind of prototype I want Tinderbox to find. So if I go down here, and I was just doing this for the sake, go find me all of the notes that have the prototype slide, and it will pull me up the notes in this particular file that I have the prototype slide on. So now I can, because I'm basically teaching myself how to develop PowerPoint slides within Tinderbox. The other thing you can do is if you click on this filter here, it will help you understand, and you can go select a particular user attribute and only search in that attribute. Go find me the word Becker, all the notes that have the word Becker in that that are of prototype slide that have the word Becker in them, and you in the author attribute, and those will come up. Similarly, if you only want to search in the word text, you can use that filter. If you only want to search in the name, you can use that filter, etc. And so now if I go back to slide overview, and then I'm going to show you a great way of using designators. So now if I'm looking at this this note, and here I'm writing a slide and I hit preview, you can actually see that I am generating essentially effectively what is a PowerPoint slide for my class notes. And I've developed navigation in that using the Tinderbox templating to do that. And so if we then scroll down and go to let's go find any. We'll use the any prototype, go by name, and I think it's a template T slide. So go find my T slide template, which is not coming up real quick. So let me do it this way. We'll scroll down to slides, and then I'll leave you all with this. Come on. Wow, it's not acting very well. Come on. It's doing that. Here we go. There is my T slide. You see that? Ah, here it is. T presentation 5C. That's why I renamed it. You'll notice here what I can now do in my my template is I'm basically saying, hey, Tinderbox. So I've written this essentially I've written this template that says, Tinderbox, I want you to go and find the text. And here I want you to go find the next note ID, and the next note ID is being driven from, get this out of the way. Let me see where it is in my, come on. I want this to go away. I'm not used to not having yeah, I'm not used to having my big monitor, so I'm getting everything in the way here. Go away, there you go. Okay, so yeah, up here, so the V note is the outline order. The V next note is the outline order +1. Previous note is the outline order -1. And so this is a way that I'm using that designation functionality to be able to then build navigation within my within my presentation. So this is essentially telling Tinderbox, I want you to put a navigation item here that says grab your previous and then link that note, and then that's allowing me to use the designation capability of a notes ID, previous note, next note, to actually produce and develop PowerPoint like presentation capability within a Tinderbox file. So I found that quite interesting. So I'll be able to post that and share that with people down the road. So I think that as you're leveraging and using Tinderbox, understanding the
Michael, you're breaking up. The last 15 seconds broke up again. Michael, the last 15 seconds broke up. We didn't get to hear your pearls.
Yeah. Am I back yet? How about now? Am I back yet?
Yes, you're coming back now.
Okay. Okay. So just to kind of wrap this up, and in conclusion, the key point is to really unlock the power of Tinderbox and unlock action code is to really study and understand this idea of designation and context and the relationship that every note has in relation to other notes, not just with its own ID, but is that note a sibling? Is that note, a grandparent, an ancestor? And then you can use that to develop an action against as you develop all your templates and the various other relationships you have with your notes. And we'll be exploring this more in future meetups for sure. All right, everybody. Well,
I'm going to jump in. I want to say that was really useful.
Yeah,
And
no, my pleasure.
I actually followed all of it.
Awesome. Yeah, we're all learning something together. That's fantastic. All right, everybody. And amazingly, my son just got, there's my son. You can say hi. My son just parked and got us to right where we're intending to go. So on that note, let's end the meeting. And I'm going to say hi to my nephew.
Outstanding. Okay, have a great weekend, guys.
All right, everybody.
Does your son work with Tinderbox?
He actually does. He did his last homework assignment in Tinderbox. So it took me a year and a half to finally get him to do it, but he's finally working in it.
Thanks.
All right, everybody. See ya. Bye.
Thanks for everything.